PJ, thanks everyone. Welcome everyone, particularly all the contributors up here today. Welcome to a meeting of minds, what was in the air, and we have an amazing collection of people here today. We have a selection of musicians who are going to play their own choice of slow air for us and explain maybe why they chose it. And we have a whole selection of other contributors here today. We have poets, historians, singers, songwriters, we have artists and photographers, and everyone has an opinion on Sliabh Luachra, I suppose. And I think they all mix really well together. So what we're hoping to do today is take a little contribution from everyone. Now, unfortunately, the only thing that's against us is time, because there's a session on here and PJ has us warned that it's on at 3 o'clock, so we have to be finished by then. So everyone's going to get an opportunity to contribute to this, and I hope I don't insult anybody if I have to gently move people along from time to time. Please don't be insulted by that. Now, the one thing I would like to say is we'll hold the applause to the end for people, if that's okay with everyone. And it is informal, so please feel free to talk and discuss amongst yourselves. The place I'm going to start today is with Peter Browne, and as you all know, Peter Browne works in RTE. He's a piper himself, but of course, as most of us are aware, he's played such a hugely influential role in popularising Sliabh Luachra music through his groundbreaking documentaries. And I'm going to hand it over to Peter now, and he's going to explain to us the slow air he's choosing and what Sliabh Luachra means to him.
Thank you, host. Thank you. So, if the time is limited, we'll have to play the slow airs fast. The one thing I was going to do was just say something about Èamonn O'Rahilly, because he was from this neck of the woods, and it's just interesting. Like in general about slow airs, I suppose, what would you say about them? They're part of the music. They're different from the dance music. There's no doubt about that, but yet there's sort of common ground. Like the dance music, you might say, seems to come from Europe in some way, but the slow airs, I mean, I don't actually know, but just listening to what different people say, are coming from somewhere else, and they were like a sort of an older art music that was in Ireland before these things were properly recorded. Maybe, was it harp music? I don't know. Was it music that was used as sort of a background for people who were speaking verse, or sort of bardic, something for the bardic tradition? And you know, some of them have words, some of them haven't. As you know, the ones that have words, you could take a safe bet maybe that the airs in most cases are there before the words, you know. And they're certainly beautiful. Some people might say that they're sort of neglected a bit, in the sense of, you know, that you need a particular place to play them, which wouldn't be a pub late at night or that, you know. But just about Èamonn O'Rahilly, just to mention him, and there's a particular thing with the passing of Liam yesterday, that, you know, he was someone who would have opened my eyes a bit to this sort of poetry. People like him, or Sean Clorach MacDonald, or Andreas McCrath, those he was just fascinated with them. But you probably know where Scrahan is. It says it's in the rugged Sliabh Luachra district, some 10 miles east of Killarney. And the family history, he would have been from 1675 to 1729, so he kind of covered the period of the Battle of the Braoin and the death of a sort of an older Irish era. And his family were sort of sponsored, you might say, by the McCarthys, who were a big family here, but that sort of changed with that order. And strange to say, the Browne family, but not our connection, were the ones who then held the land. But the Browns, those particular Browns, were Catholics and they were Jacobites, so they supported King James at the Battle of the Braoin. So Sir Nicholas had his land taken off him for his own lifetime, and then you had his son Valentine Browne. It was restored to him, and I think Èamonn, first of all, was, you know, he when the land was taken off them, he had to move off to much, I don't know where exactly, in Castlemaine, I think, and was hoping to be restored to his land, but wasn't ultimately. And you know, I think that he thought that he was going to do better out of this. But if I can just find one, I just made, some years back, we recorded a poem of his spoken by a man called Liam Bulair, who was a newsreader in RT, and he just had beautiful Irish from that era, Cower Ní Ghuiread, and it's his last poem. which was, if I can find it now here, the last one he wrote more or less on his deathbed, and it's just a very powerful kind of stuff. If I can find it here now, he's a lot of works in here. Gill in the Gilla was one famous one of his. I just remember Liam Whittle telling me a lot about these. Just to continue on the story, in 1720 O'Rahil, his old patron Sir Nicholas Browne, died, and his English educated son inherited his estates. The poet was obviously delighted at the prospect of the resumption of the pre-1690 order of things, but the son, Sir Valentine, would not or could not accede to a special request that the land be given back. So basically that kind of washed him up, and O'Rahil, an impoverished tenant of the Browne estate, despaired at the end of his life not only at the Stuart intervention in Irish affairs, but also of any restoration of his own status. And he sums up his feelings in this poem: "Cowardly Garrett, no help I'll call till I'm put in a narrow coffin," and it goes on like that, you know. "I will stop now, my death is hurrying near. Now the dragons of the Lough, Loch Lane and the Lee are destroyed. In the grave with this cherished chief," that's the antecedents, the McCarthys, "I'll join those kings my people serve before the death of Christ." So this is a recording which was made for RT with Liam Bulair, the newsreader, and also it's sort of overlaid on Matt Malloy playing O'Rahil's grave, but just the language and everything there's something quite powerful about it. Now if I can get her to work a bit of magic here now.
dragon levan lenis wei, rachas on a vask le shark no weicht on heel, no fwa for maham, reveal the Christ.
So that's 300 years ago. It's just interesting to hear it and to imagine that this very place is the landscape of all that. And I remember Kieran McMahon and other people as well saying that they reckon that when all that kind of high spoken tradition died out, that in some way that continued on into the music. And that sort of continued on into the music, and I suppose into the slow airs. So I actually won't play one now because if there's time at the end I will. But that's just to kind of give it a bit of a historic context and just the beauty of it,
That was fabulous, Peter. We'll probably come back to your slow air. We'd love to get it at the end. But it's funny you mentioned there the music and the poetry going hand in hand. And I'd like to go next to actually Eileen Sheehan. So many people would know Eileen around here. She's from Gurtglas. Eileen Flynn, originally living in Clarity now. Eileen is obviously well esteemed and much loved poet. And she's 3 books of poetry out, and you just launched your latest book last night, The Narrow Place of Souls. It's a beautiful, beautiful title for a book of poetry. And just there, Peter was talking about the background to the slow airs and the poetry, and where do you see the Sliabh Luachra influence in your own work? Do you find yourself influenced by this place?
It's so interesting because this coming out here in the car this morning from Cranage, this is exactly what we were talking about with my daughter, and I was saying, what is it and how do I define this? And like growing up here, I was writing poetry when I was a child. I loved poetry, and totally unaware that there was a history and a tradition of Sliabh Luachra poetry, even though I was in the middle of it, if you like. Like, it's not taught in schools. There was no one ever came to me and said, there is a huge tradition in this area. I was very aware of the tradition of music in the area, but not of the poetry. And I think one thing, listen to Peter as well, and with the recording, music is a universal language. Like, the notes are the same. There'll be variations, obviously, regionally and everything. But I came to it because, of course, the Sliabh Luachra poets, when I got older and got familiar with them, and of course we'd have to add in Eamon O'Sullivan into that mix as well. But they were writing in Irish. And here I was, a girl in Scart, and using English. And you'd wonder then where the connection could come from. But of course it's the sounds, because the Irish language poetry, even I'm not a fluent Irish speaker, but you can hear the music, the rhythms and the sounds. And that's universal in the poetry, whereas the actual language, the words themselves, are not. And there was another thing when I got older, and this is a bit of an old feminist rant, but you have to have those too. But it's a serious point. It's not just said for the sake of it. It's a very real thing, or it was to me, is that I suddenly woke up one day and said, Jesus, they're all men. I didn't hear of any woman poet in the Sliabh Luachra tradition. But I was very aware of women musicians like Julia Clifford and and of singers also. Even locally singers. I remember Sheila Casey in particular from down the road, who was a fabulous singer that was a neighbour of ours. So I was very aware of women in Sliabh Luachra, but not as writers or as poets. And I love that in the people of Scart, and I think all the people around here, there's a certain contrariness to the people out here, which if you use it right, it's a great thing. And that, for me, the day I kind of realised that it wasn't as a negative. It made me realise, well, the women were there, they're just not recorded. Because I knew, and I've researched, and I've kind of tried to follow this, and that the women were there and they were writing, but they just never got entered into the archive, if you like. But all that made me determined to think, well, there is a woman's voice from Sliabh Luachra, and do you know, it often gave me a kind of a determination with my own writing to stick at it, that it was an important thing to be doing, which was bigger than myself, you know, or bigger than my little words, you know. And you'll hear various mentions, if you look up old anthologies, of women referred to. But like there was one famous woman and it said that she had 1,000 poems written about her, such was her beauty. And she wrote poetry herself, but it never even named her in the anthology, and didn't include any of her poems. And apparently she was more prolific than a lot of the men were, you know. So that was a big thing to me, but in a very positive way. It gave me that kind of a stubbornness, I suppose, to keep going with this. And that the music, to me, is always the vital thing, and that's probably the big connection between poetry and music, is the rhythms and the sounds. Like Èamonn or Rahla, they're full of assonance, alliteration, and these rhythms, which are a bit in the English tradition of poetry, which is what really Ireland follows, is a tradition from England, of sonnets and very regular rhythms and iambic rhythms, which would be like weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, a kind of dump, da dump, da dump, is like the predominant rhythm in much of our English, of poetry written in the English language, whereas I've never heard that. I hear an opposite one. And I'm convinced in my own head that comes from the music here, and maybe even the speech patterns of the people. But it's not iambic, it's that lovely hiberno, which is a backwards kind of a rhythm, where the strong beat comes first, and then weak. So your lines are ending in a weak stress. Someone can come and tell me after if I'm right, because I just hear it. I'm not a musician in any sense, or know nothing about music. And I always said if I could sing, I'd probably have never written. I always wanted to sing, but I couldn't, so this is probably why I write poetry. So that was I suppose the big, that and the landscape. The landscape out here somehow gets into your blood and your bones.
There is something
That
about
connection
the
with the
landscape,
land.
isn't there?
Yeah.
Actually, and a great friend to many people here, the late great Mike Kenny, he always had a kind of philosophy about the mountains around here and how it did something to our minds and the way we think and the way we think about things.
Where I grew up now, when we came out the front gate of the cottage, I could see the Paps Mountains in the distance, which of course are a female symbol as well. So the whole landscape here to me was female. And it was full of strong women around this place, and I thought to myself, well, there's a lot of women wrote here. They had to. They weren't quiet women, you know. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be quiet either. Another interesting thing, and that's referring again back to Èamonn or Rahla and Eoin O'Sullivan. Like they're famous, really, I suppose, with inventing or being exponents of a particular form of poetry, which was the ashling, which is a visionary poem where a woman appears to them in a dream and all sorts of things happen to them and they get carried away. And of course the woman in this case symbolised Ireland. And it was written during all the upheaval, the political upheaval, when they wouldn't have gotten away with writing about Ireland as Ireland. So they wrote about Ireland as this dream woman. Those poems have the most wonderful surreal quality to them. They're set in a very firm landscape, which is the landscape of here. And I always feel that with the people here as well, that the feet are firmly on the ground, but the heads could be anywhere. And that, I feel that they capture that very well. So even though the language, for me, the Irish and the English was a barrier, if you like, nothing else was, as regards what influenced me from it or what I took from it. There was still plenty for me to bring up, to come away with.
Will you give us an example of one of your poems today?
I will. I'll do one, and it's about a woman. I'm also very interested, I suppose, in just the observations, the folklore and customs of the area and general stuff like that. So this is called Sexing the Eggs. She had no use for a glut of cocks. She filched the new-laid eggs from underneath the squawking fuss of hen, slipped from her pocket a wooden peg, threaded through with string. She held it still above each egg in turn, until she told through movement what she was there to learn. Clockwise circles marked an egg as female. A straight line back and forth condemned an egg as male. If the peg held firm, unmoving in the air, the egg was dead. She tossed the cocks and gluggers to the brace of hounds that waited eagerly outside. Their glossy coats and sparkling eyes were admired the parish wide.
Thanks very much.
And could I just add to that, even, you know, the discussion, that's why, and I'm thanking PJ for this, and even a morning like this here for me is bringing it all together, and to have the singers, the prose writers, all the different disciplines, and PJ has been doing that with Handed Down, and he's somehow not only writing other disciplines from the area into the history, but he's writing the women of the place into the history, which I think is,
Very important.
for me, it's a very important thing.
Well, we're going to go from one strong woman to another now, and we're going to go to Breda Joy, a journalist and author who's worked with the Kerryman and the Kingdom over the years. And you often covered this side of the county, and through your work, Breda, you probably collected many, many, many stories from your times around here and the characters around here. And Eileen just spoke about the way the people have with language, even the English language, the way in which we put it together of the people of this area. Have you any example of a story or a character that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, the one I'd come back to always from here would be linked very much to the Chúl here, and I would have come up to the Chúl every August weekend. But I was doing a story in this place, and Tom Fleming was my guide, so he brought me to a little house over there on the left, and there was a man waiting as if he were interviewing me for a job. He had, this was the height of the summer, he had his shirt and tie on and everything, and he had all his Christmas decorations still on the walls. And Eileen says contrary, and he was contrary in a fantastic way. That was the late Corny Tagney. He'd be a Renaissance man in one way to describe him. He was involved in such things. But the story I remember best of him is when he was starting the Chúl, he wrote to all the politicians looking for money. And I feel very strongly that the music and the traditions of here are art in its purest form, but there's an elitism about it. Apologies to anybody from Dublin, but a lot of it is rooted up there. And today you wouldn't get much funds for this. I'd say PJ could tell us a few stories about that if you were looking for it from central funds. But anyway, Corny wrote off, and didn't he get a letter back, only one, from one politician. And I'm not an apologist for Charlie High, but he sent a fiver. And as Corny would say, the flag was on the road then. But I was, again, like Eileen, I was thinking before this about, you know, what is the essence of Sliabh Luachra. And I'm a townie from Killarney, and the first time I suppose I ever heard it discussed was in secondary school. And the interpretation was given was Sliabh Luachra, the mountain of the rushes, and they were saying that it was poor land. And there was one girl in my class from the Guineguilla side, Margaret O'Sullivan, who has since sadly passed. And I will never ever forget, so many years later, the pride in her voice when she said, we may be poor in material things, but we are rich in spirit. Mm-hmm. And I think part of my theory about Sliabh Luachra is that when people are not rich in the material things, they are thrown back on their own resources a lot. And the same way, I think the Cooley Kilgarvan district would be similar to here. And I think that's where a lot of the creativity and the music and the you know, the great richness of language, I think that it possibly came from there as distinct. If you were above now in the fertile plains of Kildare and Meath, you know, you mightn't have the same richness because you're drawing more out of yourself and your spirit down here. That's one thought on it anyway.
Thank you, Peter. That is a lovely way to look at it. So, you know, you'd often wonder, like, what is this townland of the mind that is Sliabh Luachra? What is that? And, you know, we talk about it a lot amongst ourselves when people from here. But I'm going to ask two people with almost independent eyes now who come from, we'll go next to Skip Gorman, who is an American, and he's the American sitting over here with the fiddle. And you first came to World Fiddle Day in 2013, wasn't it, Skip? That was the first time you stumbled across here. And I know you celebrated your birthday here 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. It was in 2015. You were back again. You celebrated your birthday here.
And again yesterday.
Oh, I think it was a very belated birthday, Skip.
Thank you.
Very belated
I celebrated
birthday.
too much, yes.
And you have a really interesting independent pair of eyes to look at this area. What are your experiences of Sliabh Luachra? What drew you here?
Well, I was coming from Dingle, and I just happened to see a poster. I was headed for the airport, and I had 2 days to kill. One was my birthday, and of course I had heard of Pádraig O Keeffe, and I knew it was a special area. And I had never been to Castle Island, and I stopped in at Browne's bar and started talking with PJ and Tommy, and we had some Guinness, and we were joking around and having fun. And I couldn't understand why people weren't walking all over the town with fiddle cases. This was supposed to be World Fiddle Day. And so I thought I'd have a little fun, and I was talking with Tommy and saying, Tommy, you know, I'm an attorney from Boston, and I spent a lot of money to come over here in World Fiddle Day, and I don't see anybody with a fiddle. And he started to get a little edgy, and he said to me, well, how do we know you can play? You know, how do we know you can even play? You know, who do you think you are? And so I played a tune, and I just happened to play it better than I ever played it. And then you decided that you'd buy me a round of beer, and we just became instant friends for a long time. And I so appreciate everything that you've done here. And quite honestly, you know, Sliabh Luachra, I've just learned about it. But I do agree when you say it was a special place, and that when people struggle, something more comes out of that. And my connection really with Ireland is my great-great-grandfather, who, and it's a very interesting story. I started playing traditional Irish music in 1969 or 70 when I heard the Chieftains. I'm from New Hampshire. And Ali Bain came to the States and was playing some Celtic fiddle tunes, mostly Shetland. And I could hear the roots of that bluegrass music that I was playing, the old-time fiddles. And I just could feel that in my genes. And I absolutely loved it. So in 1973, I decided I wanted to go to Ireland and see Sean McGuire, and met Tommy Peoples, and I hung with Johnny Doherty, and met Peter Horn and Fred Finn. I was right in the middle of all this in '73, and I didn't really know how important a year that was for traditional music. And so I worked on the fiddle, and I had always been told, living in Rhode Island, where I was born, that my great-great-great-grandfather came from Ireland. That's all my family knew. And he came from a place, I finally figured this out just recently, from Gorman, right up next to Malin Head. He was from Donegal. And it took me some researching to do this. But I was always told that my grandfather, that he was the first Irish Catholic man to pass the bar in 1860. And it was his father who came from Gorman. And they never told me about his father. and where he came from. You know, he was the famous equal rights lawyer for the Irish from 1860 on. But no one really ever cared about where his father came from. You know, it was more about working your way up socially in the States. And I've gathered, in a sense, the same thing happened in many instances with traditional music and poetry. That it was lost. And people who were trying to find their way to better things, more money, that kind of thing, they forgot about it. And they weren't interested. And then I saw a resurgence in the late 60s with the music and with the poetry. So all I can say is I'm just really, really honored to be a part of this. And I've just loved Irish music now for almost 50 years.
And will you play us a slow air?
I will play you a slow air. I wrote this about 4 years ago, and I decided to call it Aodh for Gorman. I know it's pinpointing Donegal, where my great-great-grandfather came from. I'll play it for you. And I never played many airs until I was teaching at a music camp in Massachusetts. And my roommate was Frank Hart, the singer. And he would ask me to play airs at night. He'd have his bottle of Jameson and ask me to play airs at night, and I didn't know any airs. And so when he got back to Ireland, he made a tape of Matt Cranage playing airs, and he sent it to me. And that was really probably the first influence hearing the Irish airs. You know, I've heard Scottish airs as well. But I'll play this for you, and I'm honored to do it if I can do it.
We're going to go now to another independent pair of eyes, if you like, in many ways, and it's to Lisa O'Neill over here. And Lisa, you first came down to World Fiddle Day last year, wasn't it? That was your first visit to down here at all, was it?
Yeah.
So your first visit to Scarlett, and you stayed in a very aptly named tent that weekend, I'm here. Was it O'Keeffe, the name of the tent?
Well, myself and Alan, my boyfriend, who, you know, he brought me down, and I was very much, what is Sliabh Luachra and where is Sliabh Luachra and who is Pádraig O Keeffe, and you know, I'm not going to talk in great depth today about this kind of music because I'm chuffed to be here, and the truth is it's an education to be here, and I'm only recently taking a closer look at Sliabh Luachra and even traditional Irish music, to be honest. But anyway, yeah, we were taking a trip down here and we bought a tent in Cork, I think, on the way in, and a 2-man tent that is more like a 1-man tent, and Alan said, what do we call it? And I said, we call it O'Keeffe. So we pitched it up behind here, and it was magic. We were just here for one night, the Saturday night, and it was very special, and I couldn't believe so many fiddlers all gathering together. They all knew where to come, and yeah, that's my first experience.
You obviously enjoyed it very much. You're back again anyway, thankfully, this year, you know. And
delighted to be back, yeah.
Will you play us, you're a singer and a songwriter yourself, will you play us something today? Are you going to?
I will, yeah. I'm going to play you something that is a piece of poetry I wrote a couple of months ago, which I put to a slow air. And it was very exciting for me to discover this. I usually write my own melodies, they're very simple. And this piece, I was asked to write a piece to spend some time with an exhibition in the National Gallery in Dublin, and to write some music for it. And I wrote one, but I was very taken by this second painting that they didn't ask me really to focus on. And the painting is called The Aran Fisherman's Drowned Child, and it was painted in early 1840s by a man from County Clare called Frederick William Burton. And in the painting, the colours are fantastic, and there's a lot of women standing around, women keening, and the fisherman has found his toddler child drowned on the beach, and has handed the child to the child's mother, who's sitting by the fire, and it's very vivid, and even though it's still, there's so much movement in the painting. And what I took from it, I can see that this moment in the mother where she's this disbelief and she's looking for life in the child, and because I can see the women keening in the background, and the little bit that I've learned about keening, that the keener is almost helping the griever move on some of their grief, and I'm thinking if the mother could say how she feels, well, I don't know what she's saying. So I wrote from the mother's point of view, and it was only a poem, and I was working with Cormac Begley, the concertina player from County Kerry at the time, the night before we did the concert, and he played to me The May Morning Dew, and I thought, oh, I think I could sing this poem to that. It feels very natural. And also, I think it's interesting to tell you as a songwriter as well that I felt like, is this stealing? Because I haven't done that before, and so what, you know, this interaction between the air and the poem, I definitely felt, is this stealing? But if it fits, it feels like, no, maybe it's not. So, and maybe you can tell me. And one more thing I'd like to say before I move on from this is just that the word, I've always been very drawn to slow airs, but that it's called air, and that air is moving through us all the time, and then we can't be alive without it. We're breathing air constantly, and I like the idea that the slow air is part of our physical, in a kind of mysterious way. Anyway, I'm better at singing than talking, so so the song is called A Year Shy of Tree. Blessed the hands that make the food, blessed the sun that lights the land, but damn the tide that washed my child out of the gold when my babe you can't retrieve. She must have met the marrow or the Mary of the sea, or the fairy folk that live below the lake of Innisfree, enchanted form the waves took on to charm one so weak. Oh, with a handful of words and 7 chords, a year shy of 3. Oh, a salmon ride against the tide, with no wingmen ears. Will you kindly take and wash her salmon back up on Inisheer? We'll bury you on the land, my love. We'll bury you with me. Oh, with a handful of words and 7 chords, a year shy of 3. Oh, bless the hands that make the food, bless the sun that lights the land, but damn the tide that washed my child out of the golden sand. I have no need to eat no more. I have no babe to feed. And what in heaven need I pray for when my babe you can't retrieve?
Beautiful. Another beautiful piece of poetry mixed so well with a beautiful piece of music there. There's something so haunting about the slow air. So whether it's with the poetry mixed in or whether it's played on its own, the music almost talks to you a bit, doesn't it? And Paddy Jones, who couldn't be here today, but his grandfather would have been a neighbour of O'Keeffe's, and he always spoke about that when O'Keeffe played the slow airs, that he wasn't playing music, you weren't listening to music, he was talking to you through the music. And there is something about it, isn't there? And I'm going to go next to Joe Thoma, if you don't mind, Joe. And Joe is a hugely influential figure to the youth of County Kerry in the 80s. as a director and founder of the Arts Festival Cabal in Kinmare, which are also a painter. So you're coming from the very artistic side of things as well, Joe. And he's a retired arts teacher. And you're going to play for us a slow air as well today, Joe. What was your choice of piece, and why did you choose it?
I'm going to play the Dear Irish Boy, or in book Braoin. I chose it, I don't know, just because I like it, and it reminds me of it's the Sliabh Luachra thing of airs playing that it kind of, and PJ's thing of taking it out of the air. And I was thinking of the murmuration of starlings and how they flow along, and then suddenly they sort of jerk sideways and take a dive to the left, and then spiral upwards, spiral down. And the way that Pádraig O Keeffe and various Sliabh Luachra players played airs, there was all this lovely grace, and then suddenly they would take a dramatic turn. So there was both this lovely sadness and then a kind of a energy that you don't really find in other styles, I think. And so I was going to play that. Yeah.
Love to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's actually beautiful to watch you playing it as well. There's so much, you talk about the energy in the music, the energy that goes into it. You can see it and feel it completely. And I'm going to go next now to John Reedy. And John Reedy is a man everyone's probably very familiar with in the room. A great artist, a photographer and a journalist. And he has his own online newspaper, the Maine Valley Post, but also works with the Kerry Man as well. And he's brought a wonderful selection of photographs on one side. John, will you speak us through some of them? There's a beautiful image that you've done in the middle of this here that I'm looking at, which Pádraig O Keeffe is on. Will you talk us through some of them? And the one thing that you always see when you look at your photograph, there's people in all of them, that you really capture the characters as well of Sliabh Luachra, I think, and the energy of Sliabh Luachra in your photographs. Can you talk us through some of what you brought today?
Well, I mean, it's easy to talk through the photographs because I suppose they speak for themselves. They are of people. I might remember taking them all at the time, but I don't remember when I saw them later on. But I know the beauty about being a photographer, then you see a photograph so many times, you see it new taken if you're sober enough, and you see it in a darkroom after, you see it in a publication, and you see it in a collection after. So people think the photographers are great memories. They don't, but it's just that they see something so often that you can't but remember it. And the compilation over is the big picture, as we might call it, is of the monument out to Pádraig O Keeffe on the square here in Scotland. The others then are from various, the one with the 3 people sitting at the base of the statue, we came up on the Sunday morning after the monument being unveiled, and we had a fantastic day. We had to celebrate Mike Kinney, who's sitting there on the left. We had a fantastic day of celebration here in Scotland that day. That's in '83. The rest of them are from various Pádraig O Keeffe festivals and that kind of thing. And this one here then would be, I can't take credit for the big photograph because that was taken by Liam Clancy next door in Lyons' pub in I think it was 1955, that himself and Diane Hamilton did their tour of the country. Collecting music. She was the collector. She was an American millionaire heiress under the assumed name at the time of Diane Hamilton. I think, was she Guggenheim?
Guggenheim, yeah.
Yeah. But PGA is a devil for setting people tasks. And he, for the last 3 years, the first thing he came at me with in 2013, I think, was a batch of about 45 photographs. He said, we'll make a poster of those. So we had to, all I could think of was Sheila Prendiville's and the carols, remember the players of the year, remember all those faces on poster, but we managed it over maybe a month or so. But that's Liam Clancy's photograph, so this year's task was to do something like that. And the ones down the side are paintings I've done over the years. The top one of the door was, I suppose, inspired by Con Houlihan's line from the Wheels of the World, where he said that there's a beauty of a land where life has yet come, and there's a beauty of a land where life has teemed and has now ebbed. So that was actually a door I saw in a house, in an old, fabulous 2-story house in Castle Island, and there was briars and daffodils growing up the door, and the door wasn't open for years. The second one down is my interpretation of Pádraig O Keeffe walking the roads, which he did. He used to come down through over the mountain and down through a mountain into places like this and next door to Lyons'. And the bottom one is my way of paying tribute to all the people who came down here over the years, from Seamus Ennis to Peter Browne, the people who came to collect the music of Sliabh Luachra and the music of Pádraig O Keeffe, and those in particular. So that's my inspiration. I don't know who did this. But I can't speak for that. But as a child, I grew up. I did an awful lot of my growing up here in Scotland because my mother was from the place, and I remember being around during the first Fri September in 1967, and it was a huge thing. It was massive because everybody was talking about it. It was like people used to say around here. It was all they had. You know, they'd be working hard during the day. It was kind of animal instinct survival for a lot of people around here. There was bogs. And I mean, there were people then, and they're still around here to this day, who would have far more mass in a bank of turf than they would have in a bank account. You know, that was the way they survived. That was the way they thought. And to think that a small village like this kept a music shop going. There was a music shop here, and I think Mikey Duggan actually bought his fiddle Is that right, Matt? In this, before it became Fleming's Pub, long time before there was a shop here, and they had a section of the window given over to, and they stocked musical instruments. And I'm pretty sure that Mikey Duggan said in that piece that Donald Hickey wrote for the Sliabh Luachra annual years ago that that Mikey Duggan's mother bought his first fiddle here. Is that right, Tom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean that'll tell you their attitude. And if I want to take the PJ's theme of what was in the air here, what was throughout Sliabh Luachra, what was in the air was an attitude and the love of the music and a deep, deep appreciation of it. They really appreciated people who played for them and who could play for them. And I noticed it last night while the lads were playing, Jackie and Matt played last night over in the hall. And you were playing your own stuff for a while, you played a jig for PJ, but when you started playing the polkas to a woman, and in homage to Eileen, and to a man in the audience, the feet started going. So that's what's in the air here. So can I conclude with that?
That's lovely, John. Thank you very much. We're going to go to Jackie Daly next, and we'll ask Jackie. Jackie's possibly the most famous of all the Sliabh Luachra musicians. The Clanturk accordion player here rose to the top in the 70s, and you're there still, Jackie. So what's in the air for you? What piece are you going to play for us today, and how do you feel about the piece?
Well, I'll tell you a story first. The first time I played in England was around 1970, and I played in a folk club in Cheltenham, and you know that they were English people because they didn't know much about the music. And the gig was great, but a man said to me afterwards, "Mr. Daly, that was a lovely set." And I said, "Well, you know, I was a bit unsure about playing the slow air." Well, he said it wasn't slow at all, it was just the right speed. So anyway, this is an air that Pádraig used to play it as well, but he had a slightly different version, and it's the Wounded Hussar.
very much, Jackie. Thank you very much for that. Tá officer and will Èamonn O'Brien on Charlene and Oath. Lake Ramore on Tanga Tulatá Temple Nahacha Shah, and as a historian and an Irish language enthusiast, Èamonn is now going to share with us some of his thoughts on Sliabh Luachra and the area and what's in the air around here.
You're in the shock and the Puerto Dinawan on German and the Sumigakan. Aodh Eikal the Shan Sail, so Kulmadi Kahar from Darg, the city, but later I guess Cumrown, I guess Law, Allen and Green Gahars Spare, I guess the Fogger on, I got to it, the Fogger Honig the Dinian Shin, de Mila Blinahen 10,000 years ago. We say, and see if Shin be a city, Egbon, Garkier Dannen, and will in the most, and Bandia Danun or Dannen. Faken, she is County Magurden, a Rarkan and Shin, we say Smina, girl, Shiviel took the and Shin. The Philly, Kyotori, Pew, the Hannon, the Loganica, the Aodh, the Rainus Sopon, Mars Rower, the Mean Toga, Macan Tauri, Camille the Maha, Annika Auden, we sheer. And it's we the Filion, I guess, and culture Bale Vion and Shin, we come out on Rua Sulavan, I guess, where Peter Egon O'Rahele, Shafrid O'Donoghue and Dana, the Gaelgóir Keareen, Tai Creena or Scannell, I guess, being the Mion Philly Ella Vion, so. Now Ron and the Queen is Cadinta on the Spalpin Farmer. We went cool or soaked or cordal and Kjord Drigta on Rua Sulavan. Great took to be on and out and Urshin, we say Sheena or Fri Luachra, Shirgadi. Kiri Luachra, I guess machine. I guess Gaelgóir fad beyond or on Creedon and Tom Shin. Now I guess Browne O Keeffe, we share Scalara, I guess Sanoda, he did in the Gaelgóir. I guess we script Shalon, Laur in the hair. But how she court and Jordan either Kiri, I guess Corkig. Timper Knup the ball, I guess we Kaintori Dukashawn and Tom Shin, so the Truckady, 1930s. And then Arvin Shin, the census in the Nadigas the Hain, I guess the Nadigas the Hain, the not got chuck on being Dini beyond the Gaelga, I was Bearlaka. So, now the Kyra Shin be was a man of Gaelga, a Chúl and Shin was a law down of one. Needham Gaelga, Co Catinta is a V and Tom Shin. More and Troya. There's all in the Roddy's talk to her father's talk to you better than Nadini, so beyond Dini Le, the counter, Dini Macanta. Fear Kushuk, Dibrig Shega Cruig, Yan Sail Gukruig, Following Shea Creedon, the Pain Leha, Gotta Moor, Cogana Taloon, Cogana Sirsha, and Druck Hale of Father beyond Tom Shin. Well, it's Docker girls, Satrano on a bed, girl, Valig She, Temple the Tina, I guess we Kjol, I guess Rinka, I guess Mashin, for she, Captain for she, and Fuisha for Sin. For scale for one Faro Sliabh Luachra, quick shake of the trolley, and quick fell trolley. How are you? Don't unfair. Not too bad. Trying to keep the word from the door, our souls out of the hill, and our names out of the paper. So when Tom Chin was behind Tiert, Chin on Priv, or chocolate, this machine, but being the Daly poor, but we spirit, I guess, forsown, I guess. We shake has born the flan the call of Ian shot in his real on we should. And I told her double Dini, cure of this crack, kebal, knock out. So I guess in Shin Honey, the PJ and Shaw, Lecht and the Vega, Tashig a Hunter, and Minu and Spirit, I guess, and Doctrate. But just thing and Rod better. Simur gewil an Chúl, an Rinke, Setne Marshinde, but an Creedon or an Gaelgóir tá ma an a bhór an. Now Neill na Daly a gwine an rud, tá sí bhábhar, but mal an dún better rudí beaga dhéana bin a héad better tá Browne a gwine cúpla focail agus copán té better sa chaptain agus vi pop-up Gaeltach again and is agus tamid kon seo blian na Gaelga tamid I better me man for na ve cean an seo bin is Gaeltach an Lena agus na Edda so cwmni tan card gon I Sliabh Luachra I dessa bhhalam dul a cwd gyda long tarn siws gníomh go le siws gyda machan tawri Christy Braoin agus canna orán an sin an átú tléad a tú rúgam mé an bit an orán is ansanum so sin mé so das cacád agus den Christy dagna go rud agus dis cainte bhúdum so
Gormagad, Èamonn, Gormagad indeed, and thank you very much for that. And you spoke a lot, of course, about the richness of spirit of the people of this area and what they got from being around the fire, you know. And we're going to go next to Dr. Matt Cranage, and we'd like to welcome you back, Matt. It's our first appearance since Christmas, so we're delighted to have you back. And of course, Matt holds a doctorate on Pádraig O Keeffe, but basically is a long-time champion on all things Sliabh Luachra. So, what is the tune you're playing for us today, Matt, and what are your takes on what's in the air in Sliabh Luachra?
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and I'm delighted to be back here for this wonderful weekend. Just before I play the tune, I was looking up some of the. I have some of Pádraig's notation of slow airs, and for the most part, Pádraig called them airs, not slow airs, even though he did occasionally use the term slow, but he used the term air more so than he did the term slow. I've three of them here where I can pass these around and you can look at them. Èamonn Cranitch is one of them, slow air. Ban on Road, this is a very telling manuscript, I think. For fiddle players who are here, you might appreciate the question of keys, C natural and C sharp, second finger position and so on. For the most part, Pádraig didn't specify that. You were kind of meant to pick this up as you were going along. And to an extent that accounts for kind of, I don't want to turn this into a lecture on intonation and tonality, but it accounts for some of the mixed tonality feeling in the music, which I think contributes greatly to it. And you hear this all over the star above the garter, for instance. But in this particular case, Pádraig specified, he put in a legend, he specified where the second finger was to go on the A string. Now that was very unusual for Pádraig. That's the only manuscript of his that I've seen where he did that. The other thing is that he used some of the designations that he used for denoting what he called trills, what we now call rolls, like ornamentation and so on. He used these for slow airs, and I think that was hugely innovative as well, that he specified the type of ornamentation. And he also used kind of bar lines. Now for music which is has no meter, you know, coming back to what you were saying a while ago, and interestingly enough, you mentioned the iambic pentameter, I think, and you spoke about the inverse being here. I think slides are a perfect example of that. As in the slides, you have the long, short, and so on. So the predominant one comes first, the inverse of so I think that bears out your contention that you mentioned earlier. But these tunes are meant to be kind of meterless in a way. There's no beat. Yet Pádraig used bar lines to give some feeling of the kind of phrasing and the inherent rhythm. And I use the word rhythm for slow airs, even though it doesn't have a beat. Slow airs, I think, have a great sense of rhythm and movement and so on, even though they don't have a beat in the strict sense. But that's, I suppose, a topic for another day. The tune I'm going to play for you, so you pass those around, we look at them. The tune I'm going to play for you has been mentioned a couple of times already. If we head a bit farther south from here along the county's bounds, we encounter the Ballygo and the Coolay area on the Cork side and Kilgarvan on the Kerry side. And the air I'm going to play originates from there, but it invokes the idea of the ashling. It's ashling yell.
We're going to go now to Joe Creedon. So Joe is an All-Ireland champion and member of Cork Coolay, and he's this Macroom native here, is a frequent visitor, of course, to Scart. But Joe, do you have a song for us today, or what are your takes on what's in the air in Sliabh Luachra around here?
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
I was thinking there when we were listening around the floor there, there was a lot of thoughts going through it, and I was thinking that. But I can remember coming out of, I think there was an Oireachtas up in Letterkenny, which is a good few years ago now, and we were up there for the weekend, and we went up there on Thursday maybe, and came down Monday. And I remember coming down the road out of Letterkenny and whatever, Monday morning, sick and sore and tired. But I was coming back into another world really, you know. I had been completely immersed in a capsule up there, and I feel the same thing here when I come here for the weekend. Or even last night, I drove back home last night, you know, and I was thinking going home that I was going back to a different world than what's here. And this is a world within a world, in this place, or an Ireland within an Ireland, a different place. What constitutes it, I don't know. People said the same thing down about Cooley. I think someone said about the mountains and the way we're kind of causing, and the terrain definitely helps that or creates that, I don't know. There is something special here, of course, in the area. There's no doubt in the world about that. I try to explain to people outside of here what it is, and I can't put it into words. It is there. Was it like this all over Ireland one time? Were we all like that way back? Was this the Ireland of old, and this is just a remnant of it left? We'll say like the forest in Killarney, was that the great forest, or the great oak forest that covered the whole of Ireland? And that we sorted it all out to England to build our Houses of Parliament and Houses of Commons and everything else. Did we do the same with a lot of our customs here? Did we leave them go out over the water? I suppose reading Daniel Cochrane's book, The Hidden Ireland, he would concur with that, he would say that. How do you preserve it? How do we make sure it stays on? It's a very sensitive thing, a thing that could go, and I think very easily too, like, you know, it has to be handled very carefully and nurtured, and how we pass it on, and we expose, I suppose, the youth or the next generation to it, and we can't really teach it, we let them soak it in. But thanks be to God, they were able to soak it in. I remember doing in a singing class in a place in Cranitch, in East Cork one time, and jeez, I could get nowhere, like, you know. And it wasn't that the kids didn't want to learn, but it wasn't there. They just could not freaking pick up this, like, you know. So thanks be to God, the kids here can, like, but for some reason they can. I saw it down in Cooley as well. I teach a small bit of singing there on Friday, and you just throw it out there to them, and away they go, like, you know. That's that. You don't have to do any more. Thanks be to God. But yeah. A slow air or whatever, an air, I was thinking there, I would say Marvini there had cock came in here, and it's kind of taken as an air, but it's about a battle, like. And I think it's a different thing, like, you know, an air is meant to be sad, but this is about a battle in 1822, exactly 100 years before 1922. Where did she get it from? Had she the air before, had she the music to that before she started writing the poetry? I don't know, probably. But, maybe I'll try a verse or two of it and we'll stop. And thanks, PJ, for the here. And maybe the year, I would say, I was listening to Matt there with Aisling Gaelgóir, and that the year says that the music follows the words or whatever. I don't know. Try with listening, sure. Hosh haben Cranach in Neill flare shabim marten an fies an ihe Chon shir chal sol eik machno shalom feni de of masminte megestoch die Gwilte le bingon nor a cholan kak tak den ear is lornach tak lesjens le fuim narin Doctrate Sliabh near Finland Maglor another
Near anban na pashte mohna trif na tierko at magar quilt of irko is na mi lago nik vierten tern garde tag later na dimpel ik lauk is ik liene zij squealen na dro han lugerlang I vadigin she door gat flap nor vales trill plushit gomar tan khadarier agus temish na khoir han not or no sarir Gwi mahasar chlad y gwel, chomad na dorn na panig, le panig siol. Bocharid oing godani, lavlador ar dimpol, dy scapwyd ranine, in skapmiden fenjo vi en brak now from baile vi barnet is beacher vi hedges of this fweetig nemilelo Harry in the vart go lagi gild gan chlog gan vans gan rah gan shem edin de tasse mas de bien gan fish of god yo Kjeld mollebor lehise Nar hila marasador at the veggen of green des a ancient saw. Stadet fast the gomgantiv tan love leshen green out tan the market and drochrigum the win the mull of more. Ní gan do ma hilralo nar a farade don muine a cara gishkile godi Gaelgóir nar a diend of stad taldagness nar a diend of caricun no na sliabh mar a milk an shanat mar da iog agus a gémacha seo biog ach sarar criol Píca agus slat na roid gan sol the sauce of chuithe na díl ascadio.
So thank you very much for that. I think Joe put it really well there when he said it's just hard to explain. It is a hard thing to explain. You just have to soak it in. And I hope everybody today enjoys soaking in the culture that they're going to get here in Scart for the rest of the day and the evening. And I'd like to really thank absolutely everyone for the most beautiful contributions. It was a pleasure to listen to everyone here today. And I'd like to finish with maybe, Peter, would you mind playing for us a slow air on the pipes, please?
I will, thanks for the, yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, I must say that singing is really beautiful. The came in here. I remember trying to learn airs from singing, and you would think with the power of the pipes, etc., you'd be able to do a job. The thing I discovered was that the pipes just won't get anywhere close to the things the voice can do. Like I remember trying to learn Casa de Bond from Sean O'Fallon. I mean, you'll do it, of course, and you have different things, but you won't go near what the voice does. That's really beautiful. The other thing just worth saying, I thought, is that, you know, listening to the music of, like, you know, the great fiddle players, the Michael Coleman, all that era, I never in all my time ever came across a slow air. Now maybe you done that in that tradition up there, but for some reason Pádraig O Keeffe valued them. I understand he was a singer of sorts anyway, but it's thanks to him that we have these ones. But the Sligo tradition, I just never came across it. Maybe it's there, but it certainly doesn't seem to. But he actually gave it that prominence, as you know, Matt, well, that he gave these airs to the pupils, Paddy Crone. He made sure they had them. I know he mentioned profession and so forth, you know. And in particular, the one that I'm going to have a shot at now is this Queen in Neill. But that's, again, I'm sure that he was the last person who had that, and if he didn't have that, it was gone. I can't picture there was anyone else with it, you know. And the same with the Queenie Gonal, that we just placed a value on them. You know?
Margaret, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.